Hi everyone, welcome to a rendering teardown section. My name's Simon. Let's get started with this new office space rendering. So, as usual, we'll start with the composition. So, in terms of composition in this image, we do have something like quite simple, just a frontal view, but there are a couple of tiny things we can improve. First one is going to be regarding the horizontals and vertical. Basically, every time you're doing a frontal view, you have to double check that all your verticals and horizontals are, well, done accordingly, which is not the case here, because as you can see, if we put rulers, there's a slight gap. And the thing is, this is something that is quite easily noticeable in an image. So, like, once you have a little bit of experience. So, just that would be the first thing. Second thing is, we do have like kind of a heavy structure that, well, structure the building, but also structures the whole image. And it is a little bit like this sort of gap here are not really like big enough. So it would be, I think, more interesting to actually enlarge the framing. So in doing so, if we do something like this, where am I? And there, sorry. So if we enlarge a little bit the framing and get more space here, it's actually like, the idea is that basically you have the same distance here and here, so that would be a little bit less like that. And maybe also we might want to add up a little bit on top. Anyway, the idea here is that you manage to create some sort of frame within the frame. So you have that. And the same frame here, like that. Something like this. Basically the idea here, so is to have something inside this frame here. So we have like the lobby and the desk, and on the outside of this frame we have something else happening basically. And the thing is that we have some sort of two different stories and two different level of depth in terms of composition. So that's something a little bit more interesting compared to what was way too close, because the former framing was this one, and as you can see, it's a little bit unbalanced. And yeah, when you have something like extremely symmetrical and heavy, well, when you have something extremely symmetrical, you have to keep it that way in terms of framing, like it always works, especially if you're doing frontal view. So the idea here is to really have perfect symmetry in terms of size, if I may say, or room. And the second thing is, when you're dealing with heavy structures like this, you have to give it a bit of space so that it's actually appears heavier, but in a good way, because if it's all cramped up in one side, it's not really good looking. Second thing I'm going to talk about is it's quite usual one. It's regarding the artificial lighting, which I think here is a little bit overdone. So the main reason why is here you can see we have like a really nice natural lighting, and it seems that even if you took off at least all these lights, it would still look sort of okay in terms of lighting. So that's what I did here, like at least take off these ones. You can maybe keep these ones, but just make them a little bit less bright, a little bit blinding in a way. So it has to be like this sort of ceiling light are supposed to be quite subtle, and you're not supposed to actually see this sort of effect. It's just supposed to like radiate on the whole surface, but you're not supposed to have like these bright lights like that. Another thing we can have a look at is the texturing. There's like, in terms of like the overall composition and the overall texturing is nice. Like there's quite a bit of reflection, which is quite interesting, I have to admit. So this is something I think is working pretty well. Even the wood here is quite nice. I'm a little bit unsure about the... no, I think it's okay. The only thing I'm a little bit... like the only comment I have is regarding the marble on the floor. There's something that is quite... like as you can see here, there's the tiling and we can see it quite obviously. The thing is, when you're dealing with marble, you can actually have tiling, but the thing is they usually put it in a mirrored way, because the way they cut the stone, you can actually get like a plate and have the same one and just put it next to it and have like a mirror effect, which is quite interesting and is more realistic in terms of the way it's used in architecture. So I would sort of like make it flip on one axis in the renderer so that you can have two normal, like the same one but mirrored. Could actually be quite fun in a way, because we're dealing with an extremely symmetrical composition, so it would sort of make sense to have it in terms of texture as well. Tiny details as well, but I don't know why the Apple logo is flipped, but anyway. Another thing we can have a look at now is the overall contrast and lighting. So we took care of the artificial lighting here, which I think is much better without it. We could actually decrease that one as well. Might do it actually just by doing this. It should work pretty well. Anyway, but the main thing I think is, yeah, actually that was the former image here. As you can see, it's kind of overexposed because we have like a lot of white and the grays are some of all the same value except these ones, but it's just like not enough in terms of balance in the overall image. So that's why I sort of added level adjustment layer to increase a little bit the contrast. Like as you can see, it's just a tiny bit, but it does make a difference. And the other thing we can sort of play around with, every time basically you're playing with textures that have like quite a bit of variations in the like veins or concrete or bricks or stuff like that, what you can do is use the burn and dodge tool and use the burn tool mainly, because this guy is going to help you creating some sort of variation. So just select like your surface, and then as you can see, you can sort of create interesting variation. Just be careful not to overdo it, but still it's sort of quite interesting. And well, it's a way of like either integrating some sort of variation or make it look a little bit older in a way. So that's something to have in mind. You can have the same every time you're dealing with reflection. You can use the dodge tool to make it a little bit brighter, so that basically it's sort of emphasize the effect. So as you can see, it's something quite simple. Whoops, not there. So we go from this to this, which is quite nice. In terms of, I think the rest of it is quite good. In terms of saturation, the overall image is totally making sense. So I don't think there's anything to improve in that area. And in terms of colors, that's the good thing, is that having wood in the white interior makes it like a little bit less blend, because otherwise it would be a little bit too dull. But here we have like a warm color that sort of creates a new effect, and the like really saturated blue here, which is something related to the brand, is also quite working. So I think that's pretty much everything I have to say on that image. Tiny thing, I think it comes from, yeah, might want to be careful when you're dealing with level not to get stuff too dark. Oh yeah, there was one tiny thing in terms of tiling as well, is that regarding these guys here, because they're obviously just like the same thing copied over and over. So just be careful with having some sort of like more variation. You can either, like if you really have a single piece of a plant, just use it in different scale, flip it vertically, and you can also change the hue a tiny bit so that you've got different tints of green or whatever the color is, but just make it as much vary as you can, because otherwise it's going to look a tiny bit weird, just like it does here. But beside that, that's a really cool rendering, so not much to add, but I think the things I just said is going to improve the image quite a bit. So yeah, hopefully you've learned some interesting stuff there, guys, and yeah, see you in the next ones. Bye, guys.
Good.